How are we doing, everybody? Welcome to Russell Heritage Golf. Today we're going to be talking about the hip rotation again at the start of the downswing. So it's one of the biggest problems with most amateur golfers, right? Now, a lot of people are starting to send their swings into the channel. I say this on every video, it's absolutely free for you guys to do so, just to get some feedback so at least you understand what sort of thing you're supposed to be working on. Just gives you that kind of reassurance that you know you're working on the right sort of area. And time again, people are very kind. They send the swings in. They'll also give me a little bit of feedback about their game. But the reality of the situation is that they're always trying to do very similar natured things. They're trying to do things like drive the elbow. They're trying to shallow the shaft angle, but they're finding it difficult, if not impossible, for this to materialize because of the hip extension or the early hip extension starting in the transition of the downswing. So what I thought is that I would do a very simple drill, because a lot of people are sending swings in, some people on grass, some people from a driving range, and generally speaking relatively unaided. Now, a lot of training aids really probably aren't going to do enough for you to make a massive change. There are some good ones out there, but there's also a lot of bad ones out there. So what I thought we'd do today is we'd just take the opportunity to use a chair. Now, what I'm going to do with a chair is basically it's going to be behind me, okay? So once I adopt my posture, you can see the way the chair is going to be about fingertips distance away, right? Now, the important thing about this drill is that it's going to be a fingertips distance away, but from my right hip bone. So it basically means that I'm not going to set myself up so both hips are touching it. I'm going to set myself up so solely my right hip is on the chair in the setup position. Now, I've talked about it before in the channel in more detail. If you want to get it in more detail, then I'd advise watching other video content on the channel. But basically what should happen is that in the backswing, you should shift weight on towards the right hand side. Ideally get the weight as much as you can in towards the right heel. As soon as you start to initiate the downswing, what should happen is that basically you should start to open up your hips. Now, as you open up the hips, then your weight pressure would start shifting on towards the left hand side. But arguably, I think this is the most important part of the golf swing, because there are different ways to swing a golf club, as I talk about a lot on the channel, but arguably if you get the transitional area wrong, or another way of looking at it is when we look at all the professional golfers and all the models, if you monitor those guys, they all look different in setup, they all have different grip types, different backswings, but in transition they're all doing the same thing. And what they're doing is as soon as they start the downswing, they are increasing their hip rotation to create a sense of clearing and to get out of the way. Now, hopefully you're getting the idea already. It's very simple in terms of this training aid. All that needs to happen is that my right hip is going to be behind the chair. As I swing up to the top, you'll either feel that you'll stay in contact with the right hip, you might feel like you turn onto the right hip more, but the point is you're going to get a sense of the right hip touching the chair at the top of the backswing, whether you feel like you're a little bit more lateral or whether you're somebody who creates more of an internal rotation. That doesn't matter. But the point is that as soon as you start the downswing, you're trying to get your left hip back onto the chair. And that is a really important thing to do. Now, I would advise that you start doing it slowly. Okay, so you get yourself set up, you slowly swing up towards the top, you get your left hip to fall onto the chair, and then you swing all the way through. And do a few little swings as slow as you possibly can, just to get this feeling as to how much you actually have to trigger a hip rotation as soon as you can. Now, I think what happens is that for most golfers, it feels more powerful to kind of create more of a sliding movement. It feels more powerful to shift the weight early in towards the left hand side. But the problem that this provokes, and you can start to see this with a lot of swings that are coming onto the channel, is that all of a sudden, as soon as I start to move, let's say too laterally, obviously I move further away from the chair, and then all of a sudden you've got what's known as an early hip extension. So although it might feel more powerful for these golfers to shift the weight onto the left hand side quicker, the problem is now if you're starting to try and create shallowing in the downswing, it's never going to materialize, because basically if you were to hold on to the correct movements of, say, the arms and the upper body, you would eventually kind of miss the ball entirely. So what happens is that you have to compensate for the early hip extension, which is why some golfers will really pull the arms down and the shaft angle comes down more vertical. Some golfers might hold onto the shallowing for a bit longer, but inevitably have to do the same thing later in the swing. Now, as I talk about a lot on the channel, the whole point of this, and the reason why I think personally this is the most important part of the swing, is that you need to swing up to the top, you need to transition, which means get the left hip as soon as you can back onto the chair, and ideally you want to have achieved all of this by the time you're at left arm horizontal. Now, the reason for this is because at this stage now you would start to move differently. again, as I've documented on the channel before, now you would start to do things like rise up, release the club, all the rest of it. So you don't want to try and rehearse this movement by kind of, you know, finishing down here somewhere. It is literally, it's a transitional exercise. So do it slowly again, right hip onto the chair, left hip onto the chair, and then eventually you're obviously going to come off the chair. But the whole point of this is that you want to feel that left hip move onto the chair. Now, as you can see with all the swings that are coming onto the channel, we have variances in the backswing. We have variances in the posture. There are lots of things, but basically I would always prioritize this little transitional area first. I think if you can work on this area, then you can start to tidy up the other bits. I think your backswing, making it more conventional, basically means that it's got a better chance maybe of being more repeatable. But just because your backswing gets better doesn't necessarily mean this will. So this is why I think this is the most important part in the golf swing. And in time, then you'll be able to speed it up. And when you can start speeding it up, then you'll start to notice, you know, whether you can still feel the same level of contact on that chair. And all I'm doing is I'm taking my posture, getting myself about fingertips distance away. Chair is positioned solely behind my right hip. And from that position, I turn onto the chair, I transition onto the chair, and then obviously I would let my arms naturally finish through, continue to rotate my body through. But what it's doing is it's helping me create a clearance of the lower body. It's allowing the arms to drop down. It's allowing me to create a shallowing of the shaft, and therefore has massive benefits to being able to get consistency and power in your golf game. So as ever, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Always appreciate a thumbs up and a like. Remember, it's absolutely free, like the other golfers have done, to send the swings into channel, to expect to get some free tips and advice, and to have your kind of a little bit of an analysis, so at least you know you're working on the right thing. All those golfers that appeared in the swing today, they know now that they're going to go back and work on this very simple drill to give them the best chance of initiating the downswing with the correct sort of hip rotation. Really important part of the swing that golfers understand, and I think this drill gives you a greater sense of feeling. One of the hardest things to do in the golf swing is probably you know, cognitively understand what it is you're doing, but then it's to align the perception and the reality together. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Remember, it's free to send the swings in. It's absolutely free to press that subscribe button as well. Press the little bell icon. That means you'll receive notifications every time a new video comes out, and I'll catch up with you in a few days.